Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Praveen Nara. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's topic is responsible medicine. We'll be talking about what is responsible medicine, PCRM's perspective on responsible medicine. PCRM stands for Physicians Committee of Responsible Medicine. Tonight, we have an amazing guest speaker in the field of responsible medicine, the one and only Dr. Neal Barnard. CWC is an ecosystem of entrepreneurs, professionals, and health practitioners dedicated to cracking their wellness code by embracing evidence-based lifestyle, diet, and wellness best practices. CWC is a program of India Community Center, North America's largest community center for South Asians that is apolitical and secular. CWC offers several programs, both online and offline, and you can visit crackthewellnesscode.org/all events and register for the events of your choice. We have events for seniors, youngsters, entrepreneurs, and also in local communities. And I'm glad to inform you that this is our 77th online event in just the last 6 months. And to continue a wellness movement of this magnitude as a nonprofit, your generous contributions mean a lot to us. So I invite you to donate generously by visiting crackthewellnesscode.org/donate. And by donating, you will not only help us run these programs, but also help us build content and work on digital projects for you. On top of that, CWC is a part of ICC, which is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and you will also get a tax credit for your donations. And I'm happy to inform you that this event is being offered in collaboration with BITOSA, which is an alumni of engineers, professionals, entrepreneurs, and executives from Birla Institute of Technology, Mesra, near Ranchi. And here's the agenda for today. I'm first going to invite Mr. Arup Juchi, president of BITOSA Silicon Valley, to say a few words. We will then have a presentation by our extraordinary speaker, Dr. Neal Barnard. And when I say extraordinary speaker, you will know more when Dr. Pankaj Vij introduces Neal Barnard. He's an accomplished and established player in the health space. Dr. Pankaj Vij is a co-founder of CWC, and he will quiz Dr. Barnard after the presentation. And finally, we'll have audience Q&A. So please use the Q&A effectively to get answers to your specific questions. Not many times do we get an opportunity to ask expert directly all the questions that we have. So type your questions in the Q&A window. You'll actually see two windows. One is a chat window and a Q&A window. Please use the Q&A window to ask questions that you want answered by the panel, because it makes it easy for us to organize the list of questions, track which questions have been answered and which are not. So it'll make it easy. And you can use the chat window for other purposes. And due to compliance and regulations, our legal team wants me to share this disclaimer with you. So please read through it. Okay. With that out of the way, let's jump into the webinar. So I'm so glad to have Arup Juchi, president of BITOSA Silicon Valley, is with us here today. Arup is an inspiration leader and a global and transformation expert. He has done mechanical engineering from BIT Mesra, MBA from University of Mumbai, and MABP in management science from University of Southern Australia. Arup is a board member, managing partner, and global president of Frost & Sullivan. He's recently completed 30 years in Frost & Sullivan, which shows his loyalty and dedication to keep adding more value to this world. Arup is a wellness champion himself. Frost & Sullivan has been a great partner and supporter of CWC over the last couple of years, and we are building a long-term relationship with BITOSA as well. With that, I welcome Arup to say a few words.
Oh, thank you very much, Praveen. Hello, everyone. It's an absolute delight and honor to be in front of this extremely fantastic panel, and of course, the audience who've taken the time to be with us today. So as Praveen mentioned, BITOSA Silicon Valley, which is part of BITOSA Global, which is one of the largest alumni group of engineers, professionals, executives. It's a worldwide organization of graduates from the Birla Institute of Technology, MESRA. We have been focused very heavily on building our community. And as a part of building that community, we have formed this very solid relationship with ICC and the Crack the Wellness Code, CWC. And I must say, as we have done multiple events, this is probably our fifth event, our audience, our community has really enjoyed and benefited from these conversations. And it is very, very special during the COVID-19 timeframe and the experiences we are all going through. So we are very excited about this relationship. We look at this as a long-term partnership with ICC, CWC, and of course, we will, as months progress, as quarters progress, we'll be engaging with the Bitosa community even a lot more moving forward. We'll be engaging with them through surveys, and we hope to do these events on a quarterly basis. So I know we have such a fantastic session immediately after mine, so I won't spend too much time, but once again, welcome you all, and thank you to ICC CWC to partner with us to bring this event to all of you. So with that, thank you, Praveen, back to you.
Thank you, Arup. I really appreciate that and your support. And with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Pankaj Vij. Dr. Pankaj Vij is the president of AAPIO, American Association of Physicians of Indian Origin. He's a co-founder and doctor patron at CWC ICC. And Pankaj is also a board member of American College of Lifestyle Medicine and author of the book, Turbo Metabolism. With that, Pankaj, please take it away.
Thank you, Praveen. This is probably one of the most exciting sessions of the year. And yes, we've had over 75 sessions thanks to your generous support. And we're particularly excited today because we have one of the pioneers in lifestyle medicine, certainly one of my heroes, Dr. Neal Barnard. He's the founder of the Physicians Committee of Responsible Medicine. And even though he looks like he's about 32, he founded this organization in 1985 when he was still in medical school, and he often tells a really entertaining story of how he got inspired to do so after eating a meal in the hospital cafeteria and realizing that later he would be doing dissection and animal experiments, and he got so moved to prevent animal cruelty that he formed this amazing organization that has become really a force in medicine. As of 2016, PCRM has over 150,000 members, including over 12,000 physicians like myself. He appeared in the 2011 documentary feature film Forks Over Knives, which I would highly recommend you watch if you haven't watched it yet. He serves as an adjunct associate professor of medicine at the George Washington University School of Medicine in Washington, D.C., from where he joins us this morning. And he founded the Barnard Medical Center in 2015 as part of PCRM, where several of my friends work, and they're providing excellent primary care with an emphasis on nutrition and preventive medicine. He's a non-practicing psychiatrist. He first trained as a psychiatrist, and just look at how diverse and amazing this physician is. Such a role model. He plays the cello, guitar, and keyboards, and he has been in several pop bands as well. And one of these days, in one of these sessions, I hope that he'll play some music for us. In 2011, he was inducted into the Vegetarian Hall of Fame. He had the Lifestyle Medicine Trailblazer Award from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine in 2016, where I was there to witness it, and the 6th Plantrition Project Luminary Award in 2019 from the Plantrition Project. He's the author of over 15 books. He's been a host of 3 PBS television programs. He's the author of the New York Times bestseller, The 21-Day Weight Loss Kickstart. And this is a free program that's offered online to anyone. You can or join for yourself or for your organization. We've certainly done it in our organization, and it's been a real game changer for anybody that's started it. So without further ado, I can go on and take up the whole time in this introduction, but without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Neal Barnard from Washington, D.C.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to all my friends there, and I'm delighted that despite the challenges that the pandemic has put in our way, we're able to get together in a virtual format and share information. And thank you to all the people who are attending from around the world. You know, when I was in my first job after my residency, I was working at a hospital in New York. And I was struck by the fact that we weren't doing anything about a heart attack until it came into the emergency room door. We weren't doing anything about breast cancer until it showed up on a mammogram. In other words, we weren't using what we knew about the possibilities to prevent these things from happening. We knew that there were certain things that made heart attacks much more likely and made breast cancer more likely and made many other conditions more likely, but we didn't use that knowledge. We've also learned since then that there are so many things with regard to diet and lifestyle that we can use that are in some ways more powerful and also safer than medications, but they're underused as well. So we started the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine to advocate for a stronger kind of medicine as well as a more ethical medicine. I'd like to share with you some thoughts about where we are now with using nutrition, and particularly in this COVID world that we find ourselves. Okay, a few observations on the pandemic. When the pandemic emerged around the beginning of this calendar year, it emerged in China, of course, and one of the things that was immediately apparent was that certain aspects of health made COVID-19 much more severe, much more likely to kill. And one of these was obesity. If you were overweight, your risk of having a severe course of illness was much higher. And if you're obese, higher still. And when the virus spread to Europe, the same thing was clear. This was from the University of Lille in France. Dr. Patous pointed out that almost all intensive care patients with severe obesity are going to end up on a ventilator. So what was it? It turned out that body fat is not just a bag of calories. Body fat is actually an active, each fat cell is part of an active system. Fat cells express the ACE2 receptor, the angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptor, which on the surface of the cell acts as a welcome mat for the virus. That's where the SARS-CoV-2 virus enters the cell. It goes into the fat cell, it can replicate inside and then spray out like a fountain. And the more body fat you have, the more welcoming your body is to an infection. But that's not all there is to it. In the lungs, there are what I might call fat cells as well, lipofibroblasts, that can convert to myofibroblasts, which make the lung change from a nice elastic, healthy tissue to a more fibrous, unmovable tissue, making respiration more difficult. In a word, the more body fat you have, the more likely you are to do badly in the face of this virus. Pictorially, let me show you. This big yellow blob, all 3 or 4 of them there, those are fat cells. And at the very top of that first fat cell, you see that little Y-shaped extension. That's the ACE2 receptor. The virus attaches to that receptor and can enter the cell at that point. Anything that helps us to lose body fat is a good idea. But it's not just body fat. We also learned early on, as soon as the virus arrived, that people with diabetes were much more likely to die of the disease compared to people who did not have diabetes. And it wasn't just a question of whether you had diabetes. If you were in poor control of your diabetes, mortality was 11%. But if you were in good control, it was about 1%. And in this study, which was published in June, poor control was defined as a hemoglobin A1C of 8.1% versus good control of about 7.3%. The important point is, it's relatively easy to get from poor control to good control if we know how to use diet and lifestyle factors, aided with medication for those people who need it. So what kind of diet? I'd like to back up a little bit and talk about how the modern age of nutritional medicine really began. And from my standpoint, the page turned in 1990 when Dr. Dean Ornish wanted to go further than diets had gone in the past. His question was, can we take that ugly looking artery at the bottom, clogged with atherosclerosis, and clean it out so that it looks more like that artery at the top, free of atherosclerosis? He brought in hospital patients. They all had been in the hospital for an angiogram. He asked them would they like to be part of the study to see if we could reverse heart disease. The steps he took did not involve surgery. They didn't involve medication. It was 4 simple things. First of all, vegetarian foods, or I might say really almost vegan foods, meaning no animal product, no meat, virtually no dairy, virtually no eggs. Now, you might ask, why would you use vegetarian foods for a heart patient? Well, maybe the answer is obvious. Cholesterol is an animal product. It's not in plants. So you're getting away from cholesterol, you're getting away from animal fat, and you're having high antioxidant vegetable foods, fruits, and so forth that are helpful for the heart. Okay, good. Vegetarian foods, half-hour walk every day, manage stress, which is why Dr. Ornish didn't do the study in Washington, D.C., where I live, and avoid tobacco. And that was the whole program. After a year, the results were remarkable. Cholesterol dropped 24%. Bad cholesterol, or LDL cholesterol, dropped 37%. Your average person lost 22 pounds. But what made medical history was an angiogram, that X-ray that shows the tiny trickle of blood that gets through to the heart muscle. It showed that the arteries were opening up again, so much so that you could see a measurable reversal of heart disease in 82% of the participants, with no drugs, no surgery, no procedures, just these simple diet and lifestyle changes. So let me show you what this means. This is a slide that I got from my friend Caldwell Esselstyn at the Cleveland Clinic. And it's an angiogram of a physician. As you can see, this is a very diseased distal left anterior descending artery. It should look like a nice, smooth artery, but it's crinkly and narrowed. And this particular patient, this doctor who was a patient, was unable to be stented, and he couldn't tolerate statin drugs. So with no other choice, he went on a low-fat vegan diet. And when I say vegan diet, a vegan is not a person from the planet Vegas. It simply means a person who doesn't consume animal products. And so after 32 months on a low-fat vegan diet, let me show you what happened. Now, if the photo strip on the right is obscuring the picture, let me ask you to minimize that, and you'll be able to then see this image. You can also drag the photos out of the way. Now, as you can see, the change is enormous. This healthy artery has been restored, not by a stent, not by a bypass, not even by medication, but simply by diet and lifestyle changes. The body has the capacity to heal. So my research team was excited about these options. We wanted to then see, well, what would happen if you introduce a diet like that to people who didn't have heart disease? They just wanted to lose weight. So we brought in 64 participants, and we randomly assigned them to either a low-fat vegan diet or a conventional diet. And the conventional diet was less meat, less fat, but still some meat. There were no calorie limits, no exercise, and we did not provide food. It was just a head-to-head diet comparison. So the healthy diet consisted of fruits, grains, vegetables, and legumes or beans. We asked everyone to take vitamin B12, which is very important as well. And the foods were really very, not at all unusual. They seemed very acceptable and easy for people. They could eat pancakes or oatmeal or fresh fruit, or if they had chili, it would not be a meat chili, it would be a bean chili, or it could be a vegetable curry or something like that. If they had linguine, instead of it being with a cheese sauce or meat sauce, it would be with artichoke hearts or seared oyster mushrooms, very, very simple. And as time went on, we found that the people in the vegan group lost almost 13 pounds. The people in the control group lost about 8 pounds. That was impressive. But what was more impressive was the long-term findings. The people in the control group on the conventional diet, well, they ended up regaining whatever weight they lost. But the people on the completely plant-based diet not only lost the weight, but they kept it off for the full 2 years of the follow-up period. Meaning, you're not trying to starve the weight off, you're just making qualitative changes in the foods you're eating. And that allows you to lose weight and keep that weight off long-term. So based on these findings, the National Institutes of Health funded our research team to put this diet to the test for type 2 diabetes. We tested 2 different diets. One, a plant-based diet, or I might say a low-fat vegan diet, versus a conventional diet. And I'll show you what these mean. The conventional diet, the way many dietitians or doctors have been doing in the past, it involved limiting calories to help people lose weight, trying to keep carbohydrate fairly steady, and limiting bad fats like trans fats or saturated fat. The vegan diet, the plant-based diet, was no animal products at all, no meat, no dairy, no eggs, minimizing oils, and favoring low glycemic index foods. If that's a new concept, take white bread, for example. White bread will tend to cause blood sugar to rise fairly quickly. That's a high glycemic index food. Rye bread is more gentle on the blood sugar. That's lower glycemic index. Pumpernickel bread, even lower. It doesn't affect your blood sugar so much. So we're just focusing on the lower glycemic index foods. Beans, al dente pasta, those kinds of things. And to cut to the chase, the red line here is the people on the conventional diet, and this is their hemoglobin A1C. And if you're not familiar with A1C, it's simply a measure of your blood sugar control over the preceding 3 months or thereabouts. If a person has diabetes, we'd like to see it below about 7. And the red line shows that the conventional group did pretty well. They had a drop in their A1C of about 0.4 absolute percentage points. That's good. But the blue line is the vegan group. And they had a drop in their A1C that was 3 times greater. It was about 1.2 absolute percentage points, or just a little bit more than that. And that was amazing. This was achieved without counting calories, without limiting carbohydrate, without going hungry. And it was really enormous. Now, researchers have then looked at, in a meta-analysis of 5 different studies using the same approach. And if you're not familiar with a forest plot, this is the way we combine the results of all the studies that looked at a particular issue. And if the little black square is to the left of that center line, that means that the hemoglobin A1C improved with a plant-based diet. And as you can see, that's true in all the studies. They all show very consistently that hemoglobin A1C will get better with a plant-based diet. Okay, so a healthy diet: fruits, grains, legumes, vegetables. So let me explain to you how this diet works for diabetes. And let me ask you something, if I may. If you happen to be texting or talking with somebody else or not paying full attention to my presentation, let me ask you to, for the next 2 minutes, to pay full attention to what I'm about to say, because I want to share with you what causes type 2 diabetes. There is enormous misunderstanding of this, despite the fact that research has for many years been working very hard to nail down the cause. We understand this now, and I want to present it to you because from an understanding of the cause comes an understanding of the cure. This purple oval is a cell in your body. This could be a muscle cell. And cells of your body need a fuel. Just as your car needs gasoline to function, your cells need a fuel too, and that fuel is glucose. And that glucose is all around the cell. It's outside the cell, it's in the bloodstream, and it needs to get inside the cell in order to work. Well, how can it do that? It can't do that on its own. Glucose molecules will not enter a muscle cell, they just bounce right off. But there are little channels on the surface of the cell that if that channel can open up, the glucose will be able to enter. But that channel is closed. Luckily, you have a key. That key is called insulin. Insulin is made in your pancreas. It goes through the bloodstream and it arrives at a receptor depicted here in red. That receptor is on the surface of the cell. The insulin coming from the pancreas through the blood arrives at the surface of the cell. It attaches to the receptor like a key in a lock. And as it does, it then sends a signal, insulin signaling, to tell channels at the surface of the cell to open up and let the glucose come in. Okay? So the insulin allows the glucose to enter the cell. Great, everyone's happy. But wait a minute, what could go wrong? What could happen so that I might have pre-diabetes or diabetes where the sugar won't go in the cell and it's building up in the bloodstream? How could that happen? Well, it happens when my dinner looks like that, or my lunch looks like that, or my breakfast looks like that, or I'm eating animal products or oily foods. All of these foods have a lot of fat in them. And that fat packs into the cells of the body. That's right. Here's my muscle cell because I'm eating meat or I'm eating cheese. or I'm eating fatty yogurt, or I'm eating vegetable oil or fryer grease, this fat builds up inside the cell. Doctors call it intramyocellular lipid. That's just a fancy word for fat inside a muscle cell. But here's the important point. Fat inside a muscle cell stops insulin from working. It's as if you have a lock and someone has jammed chewing gum inside your lock. Your key will no longer work. The lock is gummed up. If you have prediabetes, or diabetes, or if you're just insulin resistant, you have a gummed up cell, the liver cells and the muscle cells. So the insulin key still arrives, it attaches to the receptor, but nothing happens. The glucose cannot enter the cell, it just bounces off. That's insulin resistance caused by the fat that you ate. The answer? The answer is to get the animal products out of your diet. If you do that, the animal fat dissipates, and if you keep the oils low too, there's not much of any fat left, and it goes away. Once the fat is gone, the insulin key can work again. It can allow the channels to open, in comes the glucose, and everyone is happy. Okay, so why do we use low-fat vegan diets to treat type 2 diabetes? Because that gets the fat out of your cells, that attacks the cause of the disease, and allows the patient to get better. Now, let me take you up to New Haven, Connecticut for just a minute. Kit Peterson, Jerry Schulman, and their team of outstanding researchers brought in patients with type 2 diabetes. They've been doing this for many years, but there was a study that they published in the New England Journal in 2004 that was really groundbreaking. I want to show you what they did. They brought in 26 healthy volunteers, and they gave them a glucose tolerance test. You drink a syrup, 75 grams of syrupy solution, and it shows that some people were insulin sensitive, meaning their blood sugar didn't rise too much, and it went down because their insulin was working. Others were insulin resistant, meaning their blood sugar stayed high, the sugar couldn't get in the cells. They then looked at their age. They're young, 28, 26. They're thin people. They're not overweight. Look at that, 132 pounds, 141 pounds. And their hemoglobin A1Cs were nowhere near 7. These people did not have diabetes. They didn't even have prediabetes. However, they then went and had an MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. But specifically, it was MR spectroscopy that allows us to look inside the muscle cells and the liver cells and see what's happening. And I want to share with you the results. On the left here, you see the intramyocellular lipid, the fat inside the cells. Every dot is a person in the study. The dots you see are the control subjects, the healthy subjects, the people who did not have insulin resistance. Each dot is a person, and they had relatively small amounts of intramyocellular lipid. Here were the insulin resistant subjects, and as you can see, on average, it's much, much higher. And then on the right, we have mitochondrial activity. Your mitochondria are the burners inside your cell. These are the healthy participants. Their mitochondria are functioning. These are the ones who are insulin resistant. Their mitochondria are being shut down. What am I saying? I'm saying that these people are young. They're in their 20s. They're thin. They're not overweight at all. They don't have diabetes or prediabetes. However, the disease process has begun. Why? Because their friends said, come meet us at Pizza Hut. And they ate that cheese pizza, and the fat from the dairy went into their bloodstream. It entered the cells of their body, and it started interfering with their insulin action. They said, come on to McDonald's, and they had a chicken sandwich. They had greasy French fries. They had meat, they had dairy products, they had eggs, they had other sources of fat. And day by day, year by year, the fat has been building up inside their muscle and liver cells. It's interfering with insulin's action. It's interfering with their mitochondrial activity, so they have trouble losing weight. They're not going to get diabetes for another 15 years. But the disease process began because of the dietary choices they are making now. And people that you encounter on the street, where you work, or that you talk with on the internet, have this disease process occurring in their bodies right now. This is the cause of the diabetes epidemic. Hypertension is obviously an issue as well, and it increases the risk of COVID-19, bad outcome. You know that salt is an issue. Salt raises your blood pressure, but where is the salt? An orange has maybe 1 milligram, an apple has 2, brown rice has 20, potato has 13 milligrams. Not much. Potato chips, 2 ounces, 330 milligrams of sodium. But let me give you a surprise. Is there something worse than potato chips? That's right, cheese. Cheddar cheese has 350 milligrams. Edam has 500 and Velveeta has 800 milligrams of sodium in 1 2-ounce serving. The salt that is used in the cheese factories is worse than potato chips. You should avoid it completely. And the grease that is dripping out of this chicken burger, that grease makes the blood thicker, more viscous. And viscous blood doesn't move very effectively, so your blood pressure rises as your heart is trying to push that blood along. When you are on a healthy vegan diet, a healthy plant-based diet of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and beans, your blood viscosity drops, and that improves things. So this change occurs rapidly. The DASH study, Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, brought in a group of individuals, and that top line is a control group. They made no changes in their diet, and their blood pressure didn't change much. The second line is a group of people who increased vegetables and fruits, and their blood pressure dropped a little bit, as you can see. But the third line are people who increased their vegetables and fruits and reduced meat and reduced fat, and their blood pressure dropped even more. But this is systolic blood pressure. That's the top number, like 120/80. This is diastolic. That's the bottom number. And the same thing happened, that the people who did the best were the people who increased vegetables and fruits, but reduced meat or reduced fat or got rid of them completely. But best of all, the changes occurred rapidly. Although it was an 8-week study, the blood pressure was reduced within 2 weeks. So here's my point. COVID-19 is not far away. It's coming, it's affecting our friends and our families. If we are on a healthy vegan diet, a plant-based diet now, diabetes gets under better control, we lose weight, our blood pressure comes down, we are stronger in the face of this virus. Now you might say, well, I'd love to do it, but my family will divorce me because they don't want to be vegan. Well, we have found a way to introduce this diet to people, including families and individuals. We've done it this thousands of times. I've never seen anybody have trouble with this. And I'll walk you through this, and then I will stop. Step 1 is just check out the possibilities. So you ask the patient or your friend or yourself, if you're doing this, to just think through, what foods would I eat if I were starting a completely plant-based diet today? So take a piece of paper and write down breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, and think about what you'd eat. So my breakfast, maybe pancakes or oatmeal or scrambled tofu instead of scrambled eggs or something like that. There's lots of choices. Healthy lunches, I could have a veggie burger or a bean burrito or a hummus wrap or a vegetable curry, so many choices. And obviously in Indian cuisine, there are many, many, many treasures made from lentils and spinach and potatoes. The Achilles heel is the use of dairy and the use of oils. But if we avoid those and set those aside, nature's treasures will really nourish our bodies. Now, Italian cuisine has pastas and pizzas and things that can be made without animal products. Latin American cuisine, beans, rice, veggie fajitas. Chinese, rice, beans, vegetables, tofu. Japanese, yes, you can have, instead of the fish sushi, have the cucumber roll, have the asparagus roll. Fast food is not the pinnacle of culinary art, but everywhere from Subway to Taco Bell has something vegan. So all you're doing is taking a week and identifying foods that you would eat that happen to be vegan. Okay, step 2 is 3 weeks. For the next 3 weeks, go vegan. Do it 100% without setting a foot wrong. At the end of those 3 weeks, 2 things will have happened. 1, you are physically healthier. You're losing weight, your blood sugar is coming down, your digestion is better, but you also discover that your outlook has changed. The way you look at foods is different. Your tastes are changing. And that's because it's been 3 weeks since you had a slice of cheese and you look at things very differently. So I want to say thank you to those of you for organizing this wonderful event and for allowing me to spend time with you. Thank you to you who are attending. But most importantly, I want to ask that we remember one thing, and that is that the people who need this message the most aren't here. The people who need this message the most are 15 or 16 years old, and they think it's totally normal to eat bacon or to eat eggs or to eat a chicken salad sandwich. And as they're gaining weight, their parents blame the fact that they're on their phone too much or their screens too much, they're not exercising. when the problem was in food choices. But if we take the information that you now have and we share it widely, we can change people's lives and we can save many lives. It used to be that diabetes would kill you over decades. Today, if you've got COVID-19, diabetes can kill you in 2 weeks. Now is the time to take this life-saving message and to share it far and wide. Thank you very much.
Wow, Dr. Barnard, thank you so much. I've never understood diabetes as clearly as I did today with the key mechanism and, you know, opening up to receive glucose. It's crystal clear to me what causes the insulin resistance now. Thank you. So with that, I would like to invite Dr. Pankaj Vij to quiz you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Neal. I've heard you speak so many times live as well as watched all your videos on YouTube, and yet every time you speak, I learn something new. So let me see if I can summarize what I heard, and please correct me where I misunderstood, and then we'll get into some Q&A. So you started off with this thing that's on everybody's mind, the COVID pandemic that's going on, and you very clearly iterated the risk factors. And the first thing you started off with is that your weight correlates, is the strongest correlate with who is going to get hospitalized, who's going to get sick, and possibly die from this virus. Because when we have extra fat cells, it's like having a welcome mat outside your door saying, welcome to my house, to this virus. So the first thing we can do is to move in the direction of, if we're obese, move towards getting normal weight. The highest risk is for the obese, then overweight. If you're normal weight or underweight, your risk reduces. And fat does that in two ways. One, it lays out the welcome mat, and number two, it actually contributes directly to lung scarring, which is how people die from this pandemic. Your lungs get scarred, they get thickened, you cannot move air in and out, and you can't oxygenate your body. And that's when, if you're really fat, even ventilators don't really work that well. The second thing you said was, the second risk factor is type 2 diabetes, and you specified that it's uncontrolled diabetes, which is defined as an A1C of, you said 8.1, so let's just use a round number and say 8. So whatever we can do to move that A1C below 8, ideally into the 7s, the 6s, or someone who's in great shape like yourself is probably in the 5s and 4s. So the lower the A1C, the better. The third correlate you gave was high blood pressure. People with high blood pressure or uncontrolled hypertension have poor outcomes. And these are all the metabolic diseases of which we already have a chronic disease epidemic going on long before this pandemic came along and made these chronic disease risk factors acute. Right now they're life-threatening, where Mr. COVID could be knocking on the door tomorrow morning, seeing the welcome mat out there and entering your house, which is the body that you live in. We talked about the Ornish lifestyle heart trial from Dean Ornish, which you said was an inspiration to you. It was to myself and all of us who are passionate about lifestyle medicine, where essentially he demonstrated an 82% reversal of coronary artery disease with people that followed a vegetarian diet, that walked just 30 minutes a day, managed their stress, and avoided tobacco. All things, simple things that we can all do. And they're more powerful than the most expensive pharmaceuticals that we have out there. You beautifully reiterated the mechanism of type 2 diabetes, which is essentially fat blocking the keyhole in which insulin is going to enter to open the door to let glucose get in. So all we have to do is get rid of that intramyocellular fat, or essentially the extra fat that we have inside the cells, so that glucose, the fuel, can enter the engine and power the vehicle forward. We heard about your groundbreaking trials, your study that you were involved with in 2006 and I believe 2009, where you showed very significant reduction in A1C in a short amount of time on a whole food plant-based diet. What you didn't mention, and I would like to iterate, is that your collaborator, David Jenkins from the University of Toronto, was the guy who came up with the glycemic index. And he's been a longtime friend and collaborator of yours, and he was involved with those studies. So I think that's certainly worth mentioning. We talked about impaired mitochondrial activity that comes from eating non-plant foods, animal foods, pizza, French fries, cheeseburgers, or from those who are tuning in to us from the Indian subcontinent, we can talk about samosas, the fritters, and the fried foods that are consumed in that part of the world as well. And there's a direct correlation with intramyocellular fat with consuming those foods that starts very early, even in the 20s and 30s. So these diseases are already brewing in young people who might be in college or even high school or starting their careers. And then we heard about the DASH diet, which was dietary approaches to stop hypertension. And again, you reminded us that it's not only high amounts of fresh fruits and vegetables, but low amounts of animal foods that lead to rapid improvement in high blood pressure. The study was for 8 weeks, but you said that even within 2 weeks, there were dramatic improvements. So once again, coronavirus is here. It's looking at whose door to knock on next. Let's empower ourselves. Let's put on our armor so that we can be protected by doing some of these simple things. And the most powerful ammunition that we have in our armamentarium is the food that we eat, because food is medicine. Was that a decent summary?
That was a better summary than I could ever have done. Thank you for that.
Great. Back to you, Praveen. Let's take some audience Q&A.
Awesome. Pankaj, thank you for that clarification and also summarizing everything. It was really, really helpful. Again, Dr. Barnard, I have to say, I am super impressed. I interviewed a lot of people, got a lot of valuable information, but I definitely got a lot more clarity on certain aspects in your presentation. Okay, so let's go through some questions here. So in your opinion, Dr. Barnard, and experience, do you see a difference between people who have blood pressure and diabetes? And if somebody has both of them, how is the effect, and is it more common in India?
Let me make sure I understand. You say if a person has high blood pressure alone or or out of control diabetes alone, is it worse to have the combination?
Yes.
Yeah, it very much so. And both are major risk factors for cardiovascular disease. If you can imagine that high blood pressure in the blood vessels affects not just the blood vessels as they come out of the heart through the aorta, but it can affect the brain, increasing the risk of vascular damage to the brain, ultimately leading to a stroke. And the high blood pressure can affect the kidneys, causing the kidneys to be threatened as well. High blood sugar through diabetes can also have effects, particularly in the microvasculature of the eyes, of the kidneys, or of the extremities, leading to neuropathy in the latter case. So all of these things add up, and if you have both of them together, as many, many people do, it's a worse situation. That's the bad news. The good news is that you don't need one diet for your blood pressure and another diet for your diabetes and another diet to lose weight. All of these things get better simultaneously. So I mentioned, say, the DASH diet. It's low in meat, low in fat, high in vegetables and fruits. Sounds a lot like the Ornish diet, except that he took it a step further. He threw the meat out completely and really boosted the vegetables and fruits. So the same diet will work for all of these things. We have been using this kind of diet for many other conditions as well, including, say, inflammatory conditions like rheumatoid arthritis. You could apply it to asthma and Sjogren's and many, many other conditions. The whole idea, lots of vegetables, lots of fruits, lots of whole grains, lots of beans. Throw out the dairy products. I know we all grew up with them, but the time has come to leave the milk and the ice cream and the cheese aside. Set aside the meat, keep the oils really low, and now you're on a healing diet.
Thank you. And you mentioned dairy, right? So it's totally understandable. One of the challenges, especially for people from India, is milk and especially yogurt have been part of our diet. And even my wife, I convinced her to stop giving milk to my kids, and she has for the last several years. But she still has that resistance to stop giving them yogurt because still people believe it's good for gut microbiome and things like that. What is your opinion on that?
I understand what you mean, and we all grow up somewhere where we sort of absorb the culture and the foods of the time. I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota, which was very meat-heavy diet. But as you grow up, you learn to see through that a bit. And when I'm traveling and meeting with my friends in India, whether it's in northern India or southern India or anywhere, the questions about dairy do come up quite frequently, and that's understandable. There are a couple things that should be remembered. Dairy products were, if I can put it this way, the cow makes milk for the cow's offspring. And that's the whole purpose of the milk, is to help a calf to grow rapidly. And in nature's plan, the weaning will stop the infant from using milk because the infant doesn't need it anymore. Well, human beings were supposed to get milk from their mother, a human being, and then at weaning, you don't need any more milk at all. If you consume it, the number one nutrient in milk is sugar, lactose sugar, which you don't need at all. The number two nutrient in milk is fat, mostly saturated fat, which you don't need at all. That saturated fat is bad for the brain. It's part of what increases the risk of diabetes. Yogurt is promoted with this idea that they put bacteria in it to populate your gut. But your gut doesn't need those added bacteria. Your gut has populations of bacteria that will naturally grow. This is your healthy microbiome, as long as you're providing plant-based foods, which are the soil that those bacteria can live in. If you're eating meat or dairy products, that distorts that soil, so to speak, and unhealthy bacteria grow. You don't need yogurt at all. And if you don't mind, I know there are many people who avoid meat products for ethical reasons. And if you don't mind, although I'm a physician and I talk about health, it's not a bad idea to remember that there are ethical issues about dairy, and I'll just mention them quickly. Let's say you're in California and you decide to have a glass of milk. That glass of milk came from a dairy where every year the animals are artificially inseminated. That's true. Every glass of milk you ever had anywhere in the United States and for much of the rest of the world, the cow was artificially inseminated. She didn't want this to happen, but she was. When she gave birth, her calf was taken away from her. If this is a male calf, he was taken away and killed for veal. If she's a female calf, she's put in an isolation hutch away from her mother, and she will, when she's big enough, she will be artificially inseminated and milked. At about age 4, this cow, who has now been artificially inseminated 3 or 4 times and separated from her offspring, the farmer will kill her because she's no longer producing enough milk. And although her lifespan would normally be about 20 years, in every American dairy, and this is true in Europe and much of the rest of the world, they don't live past about age 4. They become a low-grade hamburger. When you travel around India and you ask, where is the male offspring of this cow, dairy cow? They may not kill them directly, but they might put them somewhere to starve. They won't want to talk about this. But the cruelties of the dairy industry are very real here and in India and elsewhere. And although it's a big cultural issue for us, and I understand it, and people who are involved in it are good people, but when we look at the realities of what it takes to extract an animal's milk and to consume it for ourselves, the ethical issues are motivating for us. If that allows us to guide our own children to a healthier diet and a more ethical relationship with the animals we share the planet with, that's a good thing.
Wow. Dr. Barnard, people sometimes act because of emotional feelings rather than logical reasons, right? So I'm actually feeling that chill in me when you shared that. I had no idea about that, right? So I'm sure some of the audience will take that emotionally and use that as another inspiration or motivation to stop diet.
Let me suggest that even though I'm a physician and there are many physicians and scientists on this call, emotions aren't necessarily a bad thing. We want to filter things through our rational minds, but sometimes an emotional feeling or a gut feeling is sometimes your first sense that there's something wrong. You get a feeling in your gut that there's something wrong here. And then you have to check it out and think it through. And if something really is wrong, then it's time to take action.
Totally, totally. Now, let's lead that into another question. Do you differentiate between good fats and bad fats? For example, in Mediterranean diet, they promote olive oil and they say it has lower diabetes and heart disease and cancer effects. What do you think?
Yes, fats differ very much. If you look at, say, the fat that comes in a chicken, chicken fat is about 30% of the fat in a chicken fat is saturated fat. And the other 70% or so of the chicken fat is various kinds of unsaturated fat. And that saturated fat is the one that's linked to heart disease and Alzheimer's disease and other unhealthy conditions. If it's olive oil, it's not 30% saturated fat, it's around 14, something like that. So that's better. But it's not quite as good as not eating that fat at all. So if I'm going to make a vegetable saute, I use a good nonstick pan and I didn't need any olive oil at all. So the vegetable oils are certainly better than animal fats. There's no question about that. But if I'm trying to reverse my diabetes or really lose weight, you'll want to minimize the vegetable oils as well.
Got it. And I want to take our question back to dairy because there's another sub question that I didn't ask you, which is some people think the main source of calcium for them is through dairy. And what do you say to those people, and what are the alternatives of calcium intake?
Yeah, it's a great question. Calcium is an element that you need for healthy bones and a number of other things, but cows can't make elements. A cow can't make calcium. A cow can't make iron. Calcium is an element that's in the earth, and it goes through the roots of grass and it gets into the blade of the grass. And when the cow eats that grass, the calcium then enters the bloodstream and will ultimately get into the milk. And if you drink milk, you'll absorb about 32% of that calcium. So it ultimately came from the green leafy vegetables that the cow was eating. Now, nature knew that you're not going to eat grass, but nature thought you might eat broccoli or kale or collards or Brussels sprouts or other green vegetables, which are quite high in calcium. So then you're getting the calcium from the same source that the cow got it from.
Wow, thank you. And what do you think of eggs? Is occasional eggs okay? This is a question from Rajiv.
Okay, that's a great question. With regard to eggs, there are actually two parts of the egg that we're concerned about. One is the yolk and the other is the white. The yolk is a nugget of cholesterol, extremely high in cholesterol. A typical medium or large egg has about 200 milligrams of cholesterol. That's more than any other product you'll ever see at the store. There's also a fair amount of saturated fat in there. You have 2 eggs, that gives you about 3 grams of saturated fat. You don't need it at all. And then the egg white is just a glob of animal protein. But you're getting plenty of plant protein in the lentils and beans, and the grains and the vegetables you're eating. So you don't need the eggs at all. I don't think we need another ethical lesson, but to get eggs out of chickens, let me encourage you, if you ever have the opportunity, to see what happens in a hatchery and what they do with the males from the hatchery. It's enough to curl your hair.
Thank you. And my next question is diastolic blood pressure more important than systolic blood pressure? And I would add an audience question without going to the name of that particular person, because they specified a specific number of their blood pressure.
Yes.
So if somebody's blood pressure, the diastolic blood pressure is 55, by taking these vegan diets and stuff like that, would they reduce it even further, causing some harm?
Oh, you mean would you end up with too low of a blood pressure?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful question. When a person, if your blood pressure has been lowered by medication to get you to that level, then if you have been on an unhealthy diet and you now follow a vegan diet in addition to the medication, yeah, your blood pressure will go lower. And you might be sitting at your table one day and you stand up suddenly and you'll get lightheaded because your blood pressure is now too low. It's not the diet that did that, it's the medications that did that. So if you have diabetes or if you have hypertension or you're on medication for any other reason, let your doctor know that you're trying a healthy plant-based diet, and the doctor will back you off those medications in a stepwise manner as you no longer need them. And so, which is obviously a very good thing. But if you are not on medications and you just naturally have a healthy low pulse, low blood pressure, maybe you're a marathon runner or whatever, there's no danger of being on this kind of diet. You will not become hypotensive as a result of it. So not to worry about that. But the medications for hypertension, lower your blood pressure, and in the face, when you're no longer on an unhealthy diet, those medications can be too strong. The same is true with diabetes. If you're on insulin or a sulfonylurea for your diabetes, those medications end up being too strong also when you're no longer on such a bad diet.
Got it. And is an increase in diastolic blood pressure more dangerous than an increase in systolic blood pressure?
There's been a lot written on both of those. And I have to say where I come down is that you really want them both under control. So let's say I'm targeting, I'd like to have a blood pressure of 120 over 80. 120 systolic, that's the pressure with the heartbeat as the heart is contracting. And then the 80 is as the heart relaxes. So with every heartbeat, your blood pressure goes up to 120, down to 80, up to 120, down to 80, boom, 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 boom. So the question is one or the other of those worse? You really want them both to be under those targets. So let's say you are at 140 over 80, you want to improve. Or if you're at 120 over 90, you really want them both to get better. And it's the same interventions. You want to really avoid excess salt. You don't need to avoid all salt, but you want to avoid the excess. Be under 2 grams or something like that of salt per day. A healthy vegan diet brings you high potassium foods. Those are the vegetables that will tend to lower your blood pressure. And getting away from the fatty foods, the meats, and so forth. All of that helps.
The question is from Anu for me. This webinar is being recorded and it will be shared on YouTube channel. And for those of you who are attending these events, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to YouTube and search for Crack the Wellness Code. And you will see a lot of content being added. And please share it with your friends as well, because this is life-changing information and we want the impact to reach as many people as possible. Okay. And I think this next question, Dr. Barnard, you answered a little bit, but maybe you can add a little bit more based on Rebecca's question. So how do we help individuals and family members change their eating habits and behaviors during a critical health condition like COVID, for example?
I think it starts with an understanding of what foods will do. So many people who are, say, facing diabetes, they have it in their family. They may have a bit of pre-diabetes already, or maybe they've had a little bit of diabetes, meaning their A1C has started to creep up. But they have to have the right information as to what causes it. So many people have the idea that they got diabetes from eating bread, or having carbohydrate, or having a soda, or something like that. And so that's the reason I was trying to emphasize that the buildup of intramyocellular lipid leads to the insulin resistance, and that's where the diabetes comes from. So it starts with knowledge. And once a person has knowledge, then they really just have to put it to work with the 2 steps I described. Take a week and try vegan foods, and then take 3 weeks and just put it to work. The beauty of this is that the patient doesn't have to be convinced. They can be totally skeptical, but all you have to do is to ask them to try it. After all, if you have a pneumonia, you don't have to believe in penicillin. You can be completely skeptical. You just have to try it. You just have to swallow it and take it for the 14-day course or 21-day course or whatever it is. And so when a person does a plant-based diet, it's the same way. It's like a medication, and it helps people to change. It's really particularly useful if the whole family changes together. Or let's say a man has diabetes and his wife doesn't. But if she will do the diet with him, it gives him so much support. Or let's say she has high blood pressure and he doesn't. If they do the diet changes together, it helps everybody. And many times families will do this. They may have a teenager who wants to go vegan. When the whole family embraces it together, it's a wonderful thing to see, and it's really quite a fun adventure. And sometimes if there are children or grandchildren in the home, they can help prepare the salads and things, and it's the funnest thing ever. So I think that if we start with information about how foods run, take a week, try out the foods, then take 3 weeks and actually eat that way, that really helps everybody.
Definitely. And so, Rebecca, yeah, bring your whole family to these events. The more educated they are, the more open they are to trying these new things. Okay, so the next question is fake meat better, like with soy? And also, what is your thought on fats from nuts and avocados, and how much fat is recommended?
Okay, the fake meats, overall, they're better than the meat that they are replacing. So, for example, if you are a burger eater and you switch from a hamburger to a veggie burger, that's a good switch. but they vary a lot. These products differ. And if you get them at the store, look at the fat grams per serving. In some cases, it's 2 grams or 3 grams. That's good. That's low. Maybe 5 grams. In the past few years, though, that something has been happening where products are now on the market that are designed for meat eaters. The Impossible Burger, for example. It's become very popular, but it wasn't designed as a burger for vegans. It was designed as a burger for a meat eater. So the meat eater tries the Impossible Burger and thinks, wow, this is as juicy and greasy as the burger they've been having before, but it happens to be vegan. And so the value of that is it helps people to understand they don't need meat anymore, and hopefully they'll then go from there to healthier choices. But if you're already vegan, the Impossible Burger is not for you because it's really high in fat. It's designed to seduce the taste buds of a meat eater, and so has much more fat than a typical veggie burger would have. So overall, the fake meats are a good thing, but some of them are very low in fat and good for eating forever. Some are high in fat and really only used as a transition food. There are healthier fats in nuts and in avocados. And if you are healthy and skinny and you don't have diabetes, an ounce a day of nuts is probably a really good thing. It'll bring you some vitamin E and so forth. But if you're trying to lose weight, or if you're trying to reverse type 2 diabetes, if you have more than even just a minimum amount of nuts, you'll discover that your weight loss is slowed down because nuts are so fatty that they'll interfere with weight loss and they'll interfere with reversing your diabetes.
Got it. And you mentioned that thin and healthy looking people may have high levels of fat inside their cells, but not even know about it. And is there a test that people can take to figure out how well their insulin is working? And this is a question from Liz.
Yes, you don't need to have MR spectroscopy to look into your muscles and your liver. We do those in our research work. They cost us about $2,000 a test, so I wouldn't do that. But you can see if, first of all, the basic thing that your doctor is doing already is look at your glucose level. So if you arrive at the doctor's office and you haven't had breakfast yet, your doctor will draw your fasting blood glucose. And your doctor will look at different numbers and where that's supposed to be, and will let you know if there is a problem. Doctors can do more sophisticated tests where they'll do what's called a glucose tolerance test, which I briefly mentioned in my presentation. And there you go to the laboratory, you swallow some sugar, and then they will draw a blood sample every half hour to see if that blood sugar level goes up and down like it should, or if it goes up and stays up because your insulin can't get it out of the blood. Those tests can be done. They're easy, they're cheap, and doctors usually just start with the blood glucose test.
Got it. And do you suggest a supplement of B12? And if so, how much?
Oh, yes, that's really important. And I'm sorry I didn't emphasize that in my presentation. You need vitamin B12. You need it for healthy nerves and for healthy blood. The recommended daily allowance is very, very small. It's 2.4 micrograms. And B12 is interesting because it's not made by animals or by plants. It's made by bacteria. Meat eaters get some B12 because the bacteria in the gut of a cow or other animals will produce some B12 that will get into the meat, will get into the milk. And vegans historically have said, well, they're getting their B12 because of the bacteria in the soil or on the plants they may be eating. Don't depend on that at all. Do take a supplement. It's really important because you don't want to get B12 deficient. So if you go to the store or you go online, probably the smallest B12 supplement you'll see is maybe 100 micrograms. That's fine. Or maybe 500, maybe the smallest one you can find. Some of them have heroic doses, like 10,000 micrograms. If that's what you're getting, take it every 2 or 3 days, but don't miss it. Because if you miss your B12 and you become deficient, you can get nerve symptoms that could be irreversible, and it's very easy to prevent.
Wow. And this question is from Richard. And Richard always had A1C level of 7 and above. But he does gym regularly, walks 1 hour, and he's 65 years old, and weight has always been 70 kg. So obesity doesn't appear to be a problem. And the doctor prescribed metamorphin tablet and asked to control the diet. So his question is, what should he do to get this back in control, because it never changed in 10 years?
Okay. The approach to diabetes and to keeping a low A1C is, first of all, the steps that I described: avoiding all animal products and keep oils low. If you haven't done that yet, give that a try. That's step one. For most people, that takes care of the problem. Allow it to work for at least 3 months, 4 months, something like that, and then check your A1C again. Your A1C drops gradually, and it won't drop within the first week or 2 weeks. Give it 3, 4 months, something like that. But when you do this, give it a really good test. No animal products at all, no dairy, no meat, no eggs, and keep vegetable oils and oily products really, really, really low. For extra credit, you can eat low glycemic index foods. And let me just briefly mention that. The glycemic index, as I described earlier, is foods that tend to not spike your blood sugar. And if you go online and you look at the tables of low GI foods, you'll get a migraine because the figures don't agree from one table to the next. So let me make it easy. Low glycemic index foods. Sugar is high glycemic index. Skip that. That it will spike your blood sugar. Fruit tastes sweet, but it's low glycemic index, and that's a better choice. Wheat breads tend to be higher glycemic index, for it's just the way the wheat is, whereas rye or pumpernickel is a better choice. It tends to be more gentle on your blood sugar. Cold cereals tend to be high glycemic index. They'll spike your blood sugar, especially if the cold cereal box has a toy inside for kids. That was guaranteed to raise your blood sugar. Have bran cereal or oatmeal instead. Potatoes, for some unfair reason, do tend to raise blood sugar. Sweet potatoes, not so much. So that's really it. If you follow those rules, that's going to work. But big caution, all of those glycemic index considerations, that's step 3. Step 1 is vegan. If you're eating animal products, you're going to have trouble tackling this. Get the animal products out of your diet. Step 2, low fat. Step 3, low glycemic index.
Got it. And this question is from Pushpa, and probably from a lot of Indian families. You said cheese is bad because of not only fat, but also high levels of sodium. What do you think of butter? And I'll add to that, what do you think of ghee, which is a very common food item in Indian diet?
Yeah. I'm sorry to say that even though these things are tasty and have been used for quite some time in dairying populations, including in India, their health consequences are really pretty clear. That butter is very high in saturated fat. Ghee is as well. Ghee is clarified butter, but it still has a lot of saturated fat, and people use it. And when you've been using it, you're sort of accustomed to that taste. When you break away from it, it will take a little while. Your foods will taste lighter. But eventually you'll discover that you kind of prefer that lighter taste. And what you've gotten away from, luckily, is not just the bad fat and the cholesterol and all the cruelty that I was mentioning, because the cow isn't voluntarily submitting to these processes that we described. But there's one other thing. Dairy products, because cows are often milked during their pregnancy, dairy products often have estrogens in them. The female sex hormones, and traces of progesterone as well. So your son or your daughter who is consuming particularly the high-fat dairy products is getting the hormones. Well, what difference does that make? These hormones increase the risk of breast cancer and other hormone-related problems. So yeah, getting away from ghee, getting away from butter, getting away from dairy products, always a good idea.
Thank you. And this question is from Shanti, who is a doctor. Do we need essential fatty acids, and how do we get those without using oil in cooking?
Oh, what a wonderful question. Yes, you do. There are 2 fats that your body needs. Alpha-linolenic acid is a basic omega-3 that you do need. The other is linoleic acid. You need both. But this will not be on the test, by the way. But those are the 2 essential fatty acids that your body needs. But the good news is you don't need to count. You don't need to look for them, because they are fairly widespread in plant foods. The alpha-linolenic acid itself is a basic omega-3. Your body will take it, and it has enzymes in your body that will lengthen it to a 20-carbon omega-3, and finally a 22-carbon A1-3, that's DHA, and the brain says, hooray, I can use this DHA. Now, some doctors will correctly point out that that lengthening process from the plant-based alpha-linolenic acid to DHA kind of slow. And it can be interfered with if you're eating a lot of other greasy foods. Other greases, other fats will interfere with those enzymes. They'll occupy those enzymes so they can't make the longer omega-3s. What's the answer? The answer is to eat plant foods and to avoid the other greasy foods that would interfere with it. Now, lest you imagine that there isn't much omega-3 in plant foods, get a sprig of broccoli, send it to a laboratory, and they will tell you that although there's not a lot of fat in it, there's maybe 7 or 8% of its calories are fat. And it's a very high percentage of omega-3. If you, for whatever reason, are bound and determined to really push your omega-3 really high, you can go online and you will see EPA and DHA supplements. And they have the non-vegan ones that are derived from fish and the vegan ones that are derived from algae. And the algae ones are a little bit better, they're cleaner. And those would be the ones to pick if you want to supplement, although most people don't need to.
Got it. And the next question is also from Santi. 80 to 90% of the foods in US are genetically modified. So does it play a role in diabetes and hypertension?
Probably not. But it's easy to avoid the genetically modified foods. And who's getting the genetically modified foods? When I go back home to my childhood home in North Dakota, there are fields of corn as far as the eye can see. But every single ear of corn that's grown there is never going to be consumed by a human being. That GMO corn, genetically modified corn, just like the genetically modified soybeans on the other side of the road, are all feed for pigs, for chickens, for cattle. And so meat eaters get a lot of GMO products. If you go to the store and you get organic tofu, by law, it can't be GMO. So that's one of the nice things that organic foods are, by law, they just can't be GMO. If you're unsure, plant products are always better than animal products, but the animal products typically come from animals that have been fed GMO foods.
Got it. Thank you. We have several more questions. I wish we can continue asking all these questions because, you know, it feels like we don't want to stop listening to you, even if you speak for another 2 hours. But there is a time and we have to respect your time. So Dr. Neal Barnard, thank you so much. This was so informative and gave us a lot of clarity, like I mentioned before. And all the audience, thank you so much for your questions. And your questions always inspire this talk and bring out new information that, you know, even panelists and other audience cannot think of. So thank you for that. And I also want to thank Arup. Really appreciate you inviting Bidosa to participate in this and participating yourself. And also Dr. Pankaj Vij, thank you, and all other people who have participated in this.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Barnard.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
It's been an honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.